Hi and welcome to Ultimate Movie Trivia, where we do our best to wow you with the most obscure trivia of your favorite movies. For our first top 10 Ultimate Movie Trivia, we've chosen the timeless classic movie Aliens. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like or dislike button to let us know your thoughts on this video. And be sure to leave a comment if you think the trivia was great or you have your own trivia about the movie that we may have missed. Now on with the show. The movie Aliens was filmed in the UK and released in 1986. It was a groundbreaking movie that really set the bar high for the sci-fi monster horror movie genre. Directed by James Cameron just after the success of his previous movie The Terminator, the Aliens movie really changed the way all other sci-fi horror movies would be written and made after its release. Stacked with brilliant actors like Sigourney Weaver, Bill Paxton, and Lance Henriksen, the director's attention to detail really makes this movie a timeless classic. Before the film was given the green light, James Cameron had already decided that Sigourney Weaver would be reprising her role as Ellen Ripley at the center of his story and screenplay for the new movie. As far as Cameron was concerned, it made complete sense as Ellen Ripley was the only survivor from the first movie Alien, released back in 1979. So while contracts were being negotiated with everyone for filming to begin, James Cameron discovered Sigourney Weaver had never signed on for a sequel as part of her original Alien movie contract, and she hadn't been contacted by studio reps to possibly reprise her role. So you can imagine how concerned he became, realizing that the movie could grind to a halt before filming even started. However, when Cameron finally contacted Sigourney Weaver himself and gave her the script, Weaver was immediately interested. But now the studio rejected her increased salary demands as she had become a bankable star since the first movie in the Aliens franchise. Around the time, James Cameron had recently married Gail Ann Hurd, who had also been hired as the producer of the new movie. The difficulties surrounding Sigourney's contract negotiations got so bad that James Cameron announced if a deal wasn't struck by the time they got back from their honeymoon, they would both walk away from the project. Despite giving such a risky ultimatum, when they returned from their honeymoon, the studio execs and Sigourney Weaver's team weren't any closer to reaching an agreement. Cameron had no intention of making Aliens without Sigourney Weaver, but he was also aware of the ultimatum he presented before he went on his honeymoon, so Cameron decided to take matters into his own hands. Cameron telephoned Arnold Schwarzenegger's agent for an informal chat, and in passing told him that thanks to his newfound standing in Hollywood following the success of his last movie The Terminator, he was planning on making the Aliens movie entirely his own by writing the Ellen Ripley character out of the script. The result? Cameron's gamble paid off, as Arnold Schwarzenegger's agent immediately called his colleague, who was representing Sigourney Weaver at the time, and in turn, they contacted the 20th Century Fox head of production, Lawrence Gordon, who in turn pulled out all the stops to ensure Sigourney was signed on to the project as soon as possible. And as Cameron hoped, they wasted no time reaching an agreement to secure Sigourney Weaver's part in the new movie. Cameron later expressed in an interview how relieved he was that his bluff worked out, because if it hadn't, the film would most likely have never gotten off the ground. In the movie, James Cameron had all the actors that were selected to play the Marines personalize their own battle armor and fatigues for added realism, much like soldiers in the Vietnam War did with their combat helmets. Actress Cynthia Dale Scott, who played Corporal Dietrich, had the words Blue Angel written on the back of her helmet, which was a reference to Marlene Dietrich in the movie The Blue Angel, released in 1930. The late Bill Paxton wrote the name Louise on his armor, which was a dedication to his real-life wife Louise Newberry. In order for the Marines to look the part, James Cameron enlisted the help of Terry English, a British armorer who designed and made firearms armor and other combat-related props for film and television. In a meeting with Cameron, English was given only 2 weeks to design and make 3 sets of armor for each Marine. Cameron laid out all the requirements for the armor and combat uniforms and showed English some different materials with color samples. So after meeting with James Cameron about the details of the armor, Terry rushed back to his workshop, which was a 3-hour drive away, only to realize that he had forgotten the scrap of cloth James Cameron had given him so that he could match the camouflage on the armor to the uniforms that the Marines would be wearing. Since English had very little time to finish the armor and fatigues, he decided that he would paint and complete all of the sets of armor from memory. The result was a pattern and color combination not too dissimilar to the camouflage pattern used by the British Army, and although it wasn't exactly what he asked for, Cameron preferred the contrast between the armor and the combat uniforms that the Marines had to wear beneath it and said it makes the armor more obvious to the eye. As we mentioned earlier, all of the graffiti seen on the Marines' armor was actually done by the actors, with a little help from Terry English for a few details like the clasp and padlock on the chest armor of Corporal Dwayne Hicks. The armor was handmade all in one size from aluminum, with some onset adjustments made by English to make them fit each actor. During the filming of the movie, the role of Hicks was originally supposed to be played by the actor James Remar and not Michael Biehn. James Remar has a strong acting career in Hollywood, with too many roles for us to mention in this video, so it's unsurprising that he was selected to play a part in Aliens. However, halfway through filming the movie, James Remar's London apartment was raided by the police, and after a search, he was unfortunately arrested for drug possession. So, in order to ensure that the film could be finished, James Cameron had to find a replacement and called Michael Biehn. They both recently worked together on The Terminator, and in a short space of time, Michael Biehn flew over to the UK to take over the role of playing Dwayne Hicks. There are still remnants of James Remar in the finished version of Aliens. He can be seen in several scenes that were too expensive to reshoot, like this one where Marines enter the hive, because he's seen from behind wearing the same armor as Michael Biehn. This is also why Michael Biehn is the only actor playing a Marine who wasn't able to customize their own armor, because it had already been customized by James Remar. Each Marine in Aliens has their own distinct backstory, which was outlined in the filming script. Each actor was able to get a better understanding of their character, although their backstories were never expressed or mentioned in the movie. One of the examples would be Vasquez and Drake spent a tough childhood together in an Hispanic slum breaking the law to survive, and as a result, they were drafted into the Colonial Marines after being released from juvenile prison. Each of the actors that played a Marine spent 3 weeks training with the British Special Air Services in the UK to make sure their performances were believable. But did you know that most of the written characters in the movie actually share their first names with the actors that portray them? For example, Colette Hiller played Corporal Colette Farrow. Jeanette Goldstein played Private Jeanette Vasquez. Bill Paxton played Private William Hudson. And Lance Bishop was played by Lance Henriksen. Sergeant Al Lapone was played by the late Al Matthews. As a side note, if you were wondering why Al Matthews' performance seemed a bit too real, that would be because Al Matthews had actually been a Marine and fought in the Vietnam War. He was the first African-American Marine to be promoted to the rank of sergeant in the 1st Marine Division. Matthews was awarded 13 combat awards and decorations, including 2 Purple Hearts. Once shooting was complete, editing was passed to Ray Lovejoy. As an established British film editor with about 30 editing credits, and having names like Anthony Harvey and Stanley Kubrick on his resume, you'd assume that this would be one area that would have been free of problems. But you'd be wrong. When Lovejoy started editing the movie, James Cameron was not impressed with the slow pace that Lovejoy's editing style was having on the movie. At the time, Lovejoy was used to the slow pace in which he had edited the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Cameron was seriously considering firing him after the weekend and have another editor come in on the Monday to re-edit the movie from scratch. But on hearing the rumors that his job was in danger, Lovejoy grabbed all the footage from the film's final big battle, locked himself in an editing suite over the weekend, and presented the fully edited version of the battle to Cameron the following Monday. The effort paid off because Cameron was so impressed with the edit, he let Lovejoy stay on board and supervise what was intended to be the final edit. Lovejoy later received an Oscar nomination for Best Film Editing. Despite the movie's success, the filming that took place during the production of Aliens was anything but smooth. James Cameron decided to film at the legendary Pinewood Studios based in the United Kingdom to shoot the majority of the film's scenes. But most of the Pinewood studio crew members had not heard of James Cameron and felt he had no experience as a director. This was due to his previous movie, The Terminator, not being released in the UK yet. The lack of name recognition, combined with James Cameron's style of directing, led to plenty of friction on the film set. Through various interviews, Cameron said most of the crew members approached the job as if it was a low-budget movie and showed very little effort to do their best work. It was like they had no love for the art of film whatsoever. The film's assistant director, Derek Cracknell, was well respected among the crew due to his past work with Stanley Kubrick. He often questioned Cameron's decisions in front of the crew and was openly antagonistic, even going so far as to call him Grizzly Adams due to his scruffy beard. Ultimately, Cameron's on-set feuds with Cracknell, as well as with the director of photography, Dick Bush, caused the production to fall behind schedule, leaving the producer Gail Anherd no choice but to fire both men. The film crew did not take this well, and the firing of both men instigated a mass walkout by the rest of the crew, and with no other crew quickly available at the time, there was serious doubt as to whether the film would make it to completion. Cameron briefly considered moving production out of England, but fortunately the mutiny was resolved when Sigourney Weaver approached both parties and got them to agree to a meeting to work things out. During the meeting, James Cameron was able to convince the crew of the importance of the movie and promised to be more sensitive to their breaks and working hours in exchange for everyone getting back to work, and as a result all parties were rehired. While the atmosphere on set was still tense, the meeting was enough to cool things down enough for the film to start back up. It's safe to say that until the alien in the original movie had been designed, the world had not seen anything like it before, and it changed the horror sci-fi genre forever. The original alien in the first movie was designed by H.R. Giger, an artist from Switzerland. So for this project, it made sense to bring H.R. Giger back for the sequel to implement more design work on the second Alien movie. But James Cameron decided against hiring Giger, as he was still working on another project, and Cameron had already hired Ron Cobb and Sid Mead for the futuristic buildings and crafts. It also didn't make sense bringing him on board, as there was only one major creature that needed to be designed, which was the Alien Queen, and Cameron had already made some drawings that could be used to create the creature. After the release of the movie, Cameron admitted that he had considered asking Giger, but feared that the artist, who Cameron described as eccentric, would be overwhelming and difficult to work with on the project. Later, Giger expressed some disappointment to Cameron about not being asked back for the second movie, but still called the film's designs and execution beautifully done. Using London for shooting locations was a great choice for the new movie, which needed a gritty industrial atmosphere and environment. So one of the perfect locations they found while scouting was a decommissioned coal-fired power plant in Acton in West London. The only trouble with the location was that it was heavily riddled with asbestos. For those of you that don't know, asbestos is a group of 6 naturally occurring minerals made up of heat-resistant fibers and can cause asbestos-related lung cancer, ovarian cancer, and laryngeal cancer. The Acton location was such an ideal environment for scenes of the interior of the power plant in the movie. Cameron decided to send asbestos teams in to clean up the plant. However, in order to make sure it was safe for filming, atmospheric readings had to be taken constantly throughout filming at the plant to ensure that the air was clear of asbestos contamination. Fortunately, as a result of the cleanup process, the Acton location actually turned out to have better atmospheric quality than Pinewood Studios. As a side note, 3 years later in 1989, the Acton power plant was used again in Batman as a location for the Axis Chemical Works, which is the location where Jack Napier, played by Jack Nicholson, falls into a vat of toxic chemicals and is transformed into the Joker. The task of creating the music for Aliens was given to the legendary composer James Horner. James Cameron had never worked with a composer like Jamie Horner before. In fact, he'd barely worked with any composer. And in an interview, James Horner said he felt that James Cameron had given him so little time to write a musical score for the film. He was forced to borrow from previous scores he had written but had not been used, or had been heavily modified. As a result, the scores for the main and end title sequences used elements from his previous work on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, and an adapted rendition of Gain Ballet Suite. Horner said that the tensions with Cameron was so high during post-production that he assumed they would never work together again. However, Cameron loved the score that James Horner had written for Braveheart so much, Cameron's decision was set on Horner, and they'd both agreed a year later that Horner would write the score for the movie Titanic in 1997. because it was a story that they both wanted to do. Since then, both James Horner and James Cameron's work has led on to a number of Oscar awards, including an Oscar for the Best Dramatic Score. They both collaborated again 12 years later for the movie Avatar, which was released in 2009. The Alien Queen was a masterpiece of special effects that was one of the crowning achievements of the movie. Ripley's final action scene fighting the Queen is one of the movie's most important scenes. But bringing the Alien Queen to life in a realistic way on the big screen was going to be a big challenge. In order for the Alien Queen to have its full range of movement, it took between 14 and 16 operators according to the scene, as the head, neck, body, legs, face, lips, jaws, and tongue all had to move independently. It was the late Stan Winston whose job it was to help design and build the Alien Queen. Stan Winston was a television and film special effects makeup creator, best known for his work in the Terminator series, the first 3 Jurassic Park films, the first 2 Predator films, The Thing, Inspector Gadget, Iron Man, and Edward Scissorhands. And for his outstanding work, he won 4 Academy Awards. Winston initially constructed a mold from fiberglass and foam, which was subsequently dressed with black garbage bags and moved by puppeteers inside and externally. This was done in order to shoot a test video as proof that such a large creature would be able to work within the movie. After seeing the finished Alien Queen on the big screen when the movie was released, the fully built animatronic creature was so convincing that 7 years later, Steven Spielberg enlisted Winston to construct the full animatronic T-Rex for Jurassic Park in 1993. Anyway, that's all we have for you for this episode of Ultimate Movie Trivia. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like or dislike button to let us know your thought on the ultimate trivia of aliens. And don't forget, leave a comment in the comments section if you think the trivia was great or if you know something about this movie that you'd like to share with us. But for now, we're going to leave you with a few behind-the-scenes images